If I could just ask our first two speakers to join me up here in our little lounge area. And we're going to take some questions. And I'm going to kick off this session with a question of my own, if I may. Very heavily NHS, because that's your job title. I don't get a sense of how the social care bit fits in. There's a personnel problem with social care. People don't want to do the job. How are we going to overcome that?
Yeah, I think eventually what will happen is we'll have more joint working. I would like us to get to the point from a workforce we even start to have shared roles. So over in East Sussex, we've got some integrated care workers that are providing both NHS and domiciliary care. That feels like one part of the solution. I think Becky's going to be speaking later, but we know that actually the local authorities are committed to this. They're also being cautious. They're saying, yeah, we've seen the NHS change before. We've seen all the promises. What's going to happen this time? I think the Assembly is the key place to bring it together in terms of strategic priorities. The local authorities want to be rightly sovereign about their responsibilities, and they don't want the NHS telling them how to organise their organisation.
Could I just ask, how much democratic oversight is there? I mean, I'm a recovering politician, and I spot in the audience a couple of practicing politicians. In fact, I even spot the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board for Brighton and Hove. The Assembly will meet how often?
Well, we've got to meet. We've got to make that decision yet. I think during the next 6 months, we're going to need to meet quite regularly to develop the strategy. But yeah, the health and wellbeing chairs are, and Sue is clearly an elected official, and so in that regard, there's an involvement at that level. Again, our health and wellbeing chairs have also got an opportunity to come to our NHS Sussex integrated care boards as observers. And that's, again, a discussion that we've had in consultation with our local authorities. So there's that component. And then the health and wellbeing boards themselves are another way of providing the democratisation and actually getting the democratic voice involved in and holding us to account.
But of course, health watches are largely staffed by volunteers. We have few paid staff, and we're on a stipend from our local authorities, which is not inflation proof. So we're being asked to do, as I put my Healthwatch hat on, more for less all the time. And I don't know how you square that circle. I mean, maybe you'd like to answer that, Louise. put you on the spot.
Put me on the spot, Jeffrey. Actually, can I also reflect a little bit on your social care question? Because clearly, Healthwatch, by statute, has got a role in health and social care, and we've got powers, the enter and view powers, which teams have largely been doing online for the last couple of years, but I know they're resuming them. And I think I've seen the Healthwatch across Brighton and Hove and East Sussex and West Sussex have this phenomenal input into what the health service can do to support social care. And that has resulted, and I genuinely think that certainly from my perspective in living in East Sussex, I've seen that there's been more support from primary care into domiciliary care and into care homes because of the work that Healthwatch has done, and that the health system does seem to have listened to that. I know that there is work, obviously I referred to Brighton and Hove, supporting people, and in West Sussex, safe discharge from hospital into people's home. Again, I think the system has listened. I think the health system and particularly hospital trusts have to listen much more in terms of safe discharge. I genuinely think that there was an improvement in understanding of the relationship between health and social care and people's needs over COVID. So here's Stephen's commitment to listening more as that kind of nexus between health and social care becomes ever more important and grows.
Okay, we have Michelle with a microphone. Who else has some questions We've got a question over here on this top table here, and one over at the back. So you're going to get your health and fitness will succeed. Be careful of this table; has a tendency to collapse at the most inappropriate moment. If you just say your name and where you're from, that would be really
yes,
helpful.
Alan Keyes, Healthwatch, East Sussex, and I'll try not to collapse while I'm asking the questions. I've got two comments really. For Louise, I would like to add to your list of priorities ambulance services. There's a serious issue nationally and a particularly serious one regionally, which I won't go into detail because it would take too long, but please put it on the list for Healthwatch. To Stephen, I was encouraged by a great deal that you were saying, and I'll just pick on one aspect, the bureaucracy. I've been on the steering group representing Healthwatch for the ESHT cardiology and ophthalmology reconfiguration. It's been going 2 years. The clinical benefits, especially on cardiology, were obvious at the first meeting. And here we are 2 years on. We still haven't made a decision, we're close to it, on the location for the urgent treatment centre. And then we'll have to, then there have to be building after that. Now, during that time, patients have not had the benefits that were clearly obvious and desirable right from the start. And it's also caused some problems, especially on cardiology with recruitment and retention. I think there are far too many fingers in the pie when it comes to this sort of process. And I do think it's really urgent in the new structure to address that sort of thing so that the NHS can look much more like a well-functioning business that would recognize the patient need and get on and do it.
Thank you for that. Can we, before we do that, if you just whiz over to the other side, I'm going to take two questions at once. If you could hold that point in your, or both those points in your head for the moment. Where was it was over there, at back, behind you, Michelle. Michelle, behind you. It's behind you. Yeah.
Hello, Steve. I'm Brian from the East Brighton Food Cooperative, and we've just got a contract from our local PCN to continue our work in the community, which is a great help. I've heard a lot of talk in the last few months about the new reorganisation of the NHS and also about involving the voluntary and community sector more. I've not seen any money on the table for this great change, and will there be funding channels open and available for the voluntary and community sector from your budget to do this work in collaboration with the NHS? I mean, is it just an idea at the moment, or is there money on the table to make this sort of idea a reality?
Form an orderly queue for money. Right, so let's just take the questions over here about too many fingers in the pies and a long wait. Who wants to deal with that first?
I agree. I think it has been too bureaucratic. I can't take responsibility for the things that have happened in the last 2 years. From Friday, you can hold me to account looking forward. I think patients have, shouldn't have to wait. Now, when you do public consultation, it's appropriate that we consult widely and broadly and seek views. But then you also need to reach a conclusion in a timely way. So then if there are clear benefits, then actually we can implement them. So I can't comment. I don't know the detail of why it's taken so long. I'll be quite honest with you, Alan. But I think in terms of looking forward, I think we do need to have broad, open public consultation, decisions, action. I think that's got to be the way. And I think we've probably got a similar issue coming up probably in West Sussex in some of our sort of stroke services, for example, we'll need to think about. So that might be a test for us, I think, in particular.
And all that dosh you've got, any going to the voluntary sector?
Yeah,
See this man, he's got his checkbook with him. I've already been inside his inside pocket.
I haven't got a checkbook yet, not till Friday. I think the reality is it is a lot of talk at the moment. and I'm not going to be disrespectful by pretending otherwise. The starting point is we do have finite resources, but I think if we've got a clear strategic priorities and actually voluntary sector organisations can support that, then maybe the commissioning of that is definitely possible for the future. As of today, I can't promise you there's going to be a big check coming your way on Friday. It'd be wrong to say that, but I think actually once we've got clarity on the objectives, then actually, you know, by working in the places, that the starting point is the working relationships. So we want voluntary sector alliance to have representatives on our assembly and also in each of our place-based partnerships. So voice at the decision table is the starting point. So I think we need to do that bit first before we actually move on to actually then, okay, who's going to commission the services and who's going to be required. So, but keep asking.
Okay, we've got two more questions, three. So the hands are going up. Pete West, sorry. Who else?
No, can I just make a point from what Alan said about cardiology and ophthalmology? Just a really simple, brief point that the outcome will be better because of your involvement, and that is the value that Healthwatch and the volunteers in particular bring. And I think cardiology and ophthalmology obviously it's going on a bit, but having seen, particularly in East Sussex where I live, the value of patient and public involvement in service redesign has been just phenomenal. And for example, mental health inpatient services in East Sussex was virtually co-designed and actually run in an incredibly timely way. I think it's just a shining example of patients and the public working together with the system to create a service that's right for them. So, I mean, I think what you've been doing is brilliant, Alan, and it will have improved the outcome when it finally happens.
Okay, we've got, well, hands are going up all over the place. So, Michelle, you're with someone right next to you. Say your name, please.
Shavaldra, University Hospital, Sussex. Thank you for having us here today. It's great to see so many people here. And I've got a reflection and a question, I think. Working within the NHS, we're all driven, and I think every person in this room and everybody that works within the NHS, local government, the voluntary sector and beyond, is driven really by their heart. There's a real vocation, isn't there, that we come to work every day because we want to make a difference. We're driven by something bigger than even our own professional selves, I think. And in my time in the NHS and local government, I've usually worked across the two. I've never known a time quite as difficult as this, and it feels like we feel a bit disappointed every day that we want to be doing great and brilliant things, and we almost feel like we're letting our communities and our patients down. And that's really hard. I was really pleased to hear you talk quite honestly about some of the challenges we're facing, about finite resources and how we nuance some of those conversations with our communities, particularly with an eye on those inequalities that are so evident. And I think within the rhetoric within the new Act, there's a lot of familiarity in there. I never thought I'd be one of those people that says, oh, I remember when this happened the first time, and here I am getting older and using those things that used to frustrate me so much when I was youthful in my career. It feels like we need to have quite a different conversation with our communities. You mentioned quite explicitly something about communities are not getting what they need. People are not getting what they need. And I think one of the conversations that we need to have is about separating needs from wants. I don't think we're going to be able to do the things that we did 10 years ago if we're going to be able to address those inequalities and improve health outcomes. There may need to be some really difficult conversations that take place both with individuals, but perhaps more as a system as we decide what services it's possible for the public sector to provide in future. So that's quite a long, rambly way of saying, how bold do you think we feel as NHS Sussex in opening the door on having some really, really difficult conversations with our public about what's possible in the future?
Okay, I was going to ask a similar question because you did say you were going to do an incremental thing, approach, which will do tick off things that you can do well in a short time, which means ultimately there'll be a lot of people disappointed. So how will you handle all the flack?
Yeah, I am prepared to be very bold, and it's no accident that Tom Gurney, our Chief Communications Officer, is here today, and I'm his best friend. I'm maybe not his best friend because I keep saying we need to do more, we need to do more, we need to do more. But I think that's part of it. It starts having the conversation. We've got to do more than just talk, though, Nicole. That I think is the trick. We've done a lot of talking and we've done a lot of preparation for Friday. It's got to get beyond that, and it's got to then be decisions and action. But I really want to encourage us to have a grown-up, mature conversation, because I don't think we can do, well, I know we cannot do everything and we cannot do it all at once. But I want by the end of the first year to be able to point to say, we did that, and we did that. Now that's another 100 million things we should have done. And we will continue to provide care. It's not we're going to stop, but I want to be able to find things we can have a demonstrable improvement in year one. Then I think we can say, actually, this is no longer a talking shop. This is a body for action to make better health and care on that aspect, and that aspect.
Louise, do you want to chip in there?
Yeah, no, I kind of think, when I read the list of questions that had been given to us in advance, I thought, actually, it's the people in the room who are going to need to answer and help answer all of those questions. And the Healthwatch and the voluntary and community sector's role on the NHS assembly, so the Integrated Care Partnership, who will be deciding the strategy, is going to be incredibly important. So some of those prioritisation decisions will be made within that partnership, within the assembly, of which this room full of people are empowered to make some of those decisions and have those tricky trade-off conversations. So it's not Stephen, actually, I don't think, who's going to be the person, who's going to be the individual making those decisions. It's going to be the voluntary and community sector, Healthwatch, the NHS, the local authorities, the providers, making those decisions together. And I think it will be difficult, but we've all got a role to play in making those decisions. That was my main point.
Okay. Come in quickly.
Yeah. I don't think it's a binary choice either. I think because actually what we need to talk about is phasing. Yeah, it's not that we're going to be blind to all the things we need to do, but let's say we'll do this in year one, this in year two, this in year three, etc.
Okay, we've got a question at the back, and then we've got two people anxious to ask questions right in the front. So first, and then we'll do it incrementally as well. So question from, say your name.
Hi, I'm Helen Rice. I'm Chief Executive of Age UK, West Sussex, Brighton and Hove. Hi. So nice to be here in person today, so thank you for that. Just to say, and I love that question, I would totally agree with you, but also I'm interested to know how bold you're willing to be with the voluntary sector. And I have good indications that probably answer is quite bold, which would be fantastic to see. Because when I see a slide like the NHS slide you put up where we're VCS support at the end, it will always get us a little bit riled in a room where we are delivering services. We're not just a bit of support around the edges, we are delivering services. We're delivering to 20,000 older people in West Sussex, Brighton and Hove, for example. So it's a challenge really to say, please be bold. And I know you're all respectful of what we do and how important we are, I know that. But I want to say it for the record, really, that to see that in action, as well as being bold with how you work with the public, will be wonderful. And I think we've got an opportunity to be a real trailblazer here in how we do that, comparatively to other parts of the country as well, which would be great to see that happen. And the final bit really is just around how we see commissioning. Now, there are some exceptional commissioners. But I'll give you a small example of a huge system. So I was very lucky that we had £200,000 around Christmas time for the winter pressure. My project manager joined a meeting and there were 10 NHS commissioners on that meeting with them for £200,000. So that suggests either you don't trust me to spend your money correctly, or we just don't know how to work with you. And they were wonderful people. These weren't bad people. These people trying to do a great job and working really, really hard. So it's not suggesting otherwise, but I can't imagine the scale of the overhaul to be done to how we all work together. So just a question really is, can we be really bold about doing it differently and trusting each other? That would be just amazing. Thank you.
Okay, if we hold on to that and if you could bring the microphone up to the top table here. There are two people with a question. I'm very glad you made the point about commissioning. There have been some significant commissioning failures in this neck of the woods. It doesn't surprise me to hear you had so many commissioners around the table for one contract. But there we go. Pete West.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Right, good. Thank you for your presentations. It's really a question for Stephen. I was very drawn by what you said about health and well-being, about keeping people well, living well, aging well. And that's certainly been something that has been an aspiration for some time, but has not been well supported, because often the responsibilities lie in areas where the resources aren't in order to achieve those ends. Recently, we've been having a very large conversation in the city, I'm glad to say, about how we're going to make more of our wonderful open spaces, our massive downland estate. We've got 12,000 acres of publicly owned land surrounding the city. It's a huge opportunity, a huge health and well-being opportunity that is completely under utilised so far. So there's a lot we can do. It will take resource. The council won't have that resource. It'll be looking in other places to get the resource to make the most of that. So and we've got the National Park, which is a huge part of Sussex. East Sussex, I know most of it is an area of outstanding natural beauty. The opportunities are there. Will, as part of that strategy, we be seeing some serious money being put forward to support improving access, improving active access, and the way that we can then try and overcome some of the inequalities? Because we know that the people that at the moment are visiting the countryside and getting the most from it are often middle-class, car-born people. And the working class people in Brighton and Hove live on estates on the fringes of our downland, and most of them don't go there. It's literally out their back gate. How are we going to encourage them out there? So if we are having a massive step change here with the way that you use that £3.5 billion, are we going to see some serious endeavour to support these sorts of agendas? Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's to do with mental health and preventative wellness. So before we take the next question, who wants to kick off with that? And don't forget the commissioning issue.
I think the two issues are linked.
It's a commissioning team.
Yeah, no, I think Helen, I think points well made. I think there are improvements in our productivity in our commissioning functions, is the polite way I'll put that. Yeah, and part of that is we've got to learn to work with the voluntary sector. You know, the thing is, the voluntary sector is not one thing, is it? That's the reality. It's like general practice. Each surgery is its own independent business, in the same way that each voluntary sector organisation is separate too. So I think we can be more efficient in the way that we engage, and we need to be. And no disrespect meant on my slide. I apologise for that. I do understand you provide services too. But I think actually, then to Alan's point at the front, then I think my answer is I hope so. Got to remember, this is not a dictatorship. So I may be the chair of the new assembly, but I'll be one of 24 members. So in that sense, it's not my decision to make. But I think that for the first time with this new organisation, with NHS Sussex being responsible for all of the NHS organisations, we can start to make investments in things that will help the NHS. And I think the preventative healthcare agenda is part of that. I think actually the discharge at the other end of the equation is another part of that. And that's why working with the local authorities is so important. So Jeffrey makes the point that, yes, I'm talking about the NHS a lot because that was sort of what my brief was today. But the reality is we can't do this on our own. And so I hope that we will be able to invest additional monies to support preventative health, because that will, if that keeps people out of hospital and avoiding longer term, more expensive care needs, it's more efficient as well. So, but it's also quite a long-term payback. So we're going to play that one through.
Louise, Healthwatch is on the receiving end of commissioning decisions. usually from the local authorities.
Oh, well, yeah.
But
I mean, that's a whole other discussion.
that's a whole, that is a whole other discussion. But
Can I
come back on both.
please just, and I think you make a really good point, Pete, about the, you know, prevention and you know, physical activity and everything that we can do to stop people getting into the NHS in the first place, just incredibly important. I think that the point about that you raise from Age UK and the value of the voluntary sector in general, and how we in the voluntary sector need to kind of embrace that and see ourselves as partners shaping the new world, and not just as kind of on the receiving end of project funds sometimes, is also our challenge, actually. You know, firmly with my Healthwatch voluntary sector kind of hat on. And at the same time, we need to be really clear that we must not keep plugging the gap for failings of the NHS. Because quite often what will happen is Healthwatch will have information advice services, and they get phone calls from people, as many of you will know, who are at their absolute wit's end because they can't find the right person to talk to in the NHS. And that is a failing of the NHS. So that, you know, the two things are that we have to keep this dual role going of being really clear and sometimes critical, but in a constructive way, of where NHS services are failing and where people are at their absolute wit's end. They don't understand communications, they don't understand who to speak to, they're coming to Healthwatch. And then at the same time, holding this duality of, we are also here as a voluntary and community sector, as Healthwatch, of working with the NHS to redesign services to make them better. And actually dentistry, given that the responsibility will come under the NHS Sussex for commissioning terms, is a really great opportunity for people in this room and patients in the public to redesign dentistry services with NHS colleagues over the next year, and with a range of other areas, obviously. So that's holding those two kind of dual roles at the same time, I think, is going to be the key. I don't think these new structures will work without the voluntary and community sector, because the voluntary community sector already is such an integral part of soaking up a huge, and is not recognised well enough. It soaks up a huge amount of the health need of the population in its kind of widest definition. So I think that, well, I'm sure that Stephen appreciates that. And I think that appreciation needs to extend to people in other health bodies, in primary care, in trusts, and everybody needs to start having, as you say, that different relationship with the voluntary sector.
Okay, well, thank you for making that point. There's one of our own volunteers from Healthwatch Brighton Hove who's been waiting very patiently. Say your name and
I'm not used to using these, I'm afraid.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I'm Sylvia New. Have been for many years a Healthwatch volunteer. I was a volunteer for Link, which were the forerunners before Healthwatch. I also chair my PPG, patient participation group at the doctor's surgery. So in addition to that, I go to Hangleton and West Hove Health Forum meetings. I go to the PPG network meetings. What I'm really working around to is, on the assembly that you're setting up, is there going to be a place for feedback from members or from PPG, from the PPG network? Because you will get there the patient's opinion and, you know, what they would like and what's likely to go wrong.
I think the reality is, on the assembly, the answer is probably no. However, on the partnerships in each of the three places, then I think there's an opportunity there. Because I think that, because actually the service design and delivery will be taking place at the East Sussex, West Sussex, Brighton and Hove level, rather than Pan Sussex, and then probably down to individual neighbourhoods. And that's where how we design, primary care, it gets reimagined. I think it becomes important, and that's where the PPGs will play a really crucial role. So I think it's getting to be plugged into the right part of the system to have the most impact.
My other thought was, certainly at the surgery I'm going to and other local ones I know of, they are beginning to employ social prescribers, which I think is a really brilliant idea. And it takes quite a lot of the pressure off GPs if they've got somebody who's kind of turning up every week, or every, lonely people who just want a little chat and assurance. It takes a lot of the pressure off them if they can be sent into something else. Yeah, I just wonder, is there separate funding for that, or does that have to come out of the GP's budget?
Well, I think we need to start, sorry.
Yeah, please do.
I think we need to stop thinking of primary care as GPs. Primary care needs to be broader than just the GPs, I think, in reality. And that's why I think pharmacy also has a role, optometry, dentistry, and also potentially social prescribing as well. So I think reimagining primary care needs to be more than just the GP surgeries, because I think they can't do it on their own. But you make a great point about social prescribing. I think there's a real benefit there.
Okay, we've got 2 questions from this table. We can take those together. And then we've got someone else waving. Hello, nice to see you. So say your name and just what your question is.
Hi, I'm Caroline Ridley. I'm the CEO at Impact Initiatives, so a voluntary sector organisation, work across Sussex with people of all ages. I think banging on is the term that keeps being repeated, so I'm going to use that again for banging on about the contributions of the voluntary sector. And I think also wants to make a bit of a statement about focusing on what's already strong, but what we can build on. And I think a lot of what you were saying about the commissioning and about the preventative services, they are there and they are working well. And but I think focusing on that fact of all the people that we keep out of the NHS services, and I think that's particularly strong at the moment around young people and mental health. I think our services are supporting a lot of people who are waiting for the higher level services, but then also they come back into our services when they've had that. I was quite shocked the other day. I was talking to somebody about the top reason for young people attending children's A&E is mental health issues, and also the biggest reason for children being inpatients, which is quite shocking, I think. But also going on the older people's services. So the organisation I work for, lead on the Ageing Well programme across Brighton and Hove. That's 10 organisations delivering and working really, really well together, and so much stronger together to keep those older people out of the higher level services. And finally, I want to say this, I'm one of the elected commissioning reps for Brighton and Hove, so would certainly be interested in having conversations about the commissioning, which I think we can build on what we've got and make it better, quicker, more effective.
Could we just pass the mic over to your table companion? Say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Deborah Balfour. I am the head of West Sussex Collaborative Working in the CCG, but actually I'm on loan from West Sussex Public Health. You spoke about prioritisation really based on the benefits of scale, so population impacted, etc. How are you going to make sure that the other priority when it comes to really tackling health inequalities isn't lost within that? Because actually we will be talking about their much smaller groups of people who will cost more to actually enable them to have the healthcare that they need and deserve. How are you going to make sure that that's not lost when you are just looking at benefits of scale?
Okay, now a lot of these questions seem to be directed at Stephen, but I will come to, you're not going to get away scot-free, Louise. So Stephen, how do you want to pick up those?
I think the first point, I think I said very clearly that the NHS can't do this on its own. And I think the voluntary sector is fundamental to actually our ability to provide services. It was a conscious decision for me. I didn't have to have a director of children's services on my board. I chose to do that because I think it's really important that children's services, and I'm thinking about especially the mental health perspective that you mentioned. So you're talking to the converted, and that's something that we're going to clearly have to prioritise. In terms of the scale issue, this is going to be the real rub, isn't it? You know, we just because we're going to prioritise, some really key strategic initiatives, that's not to say we won't be investing any money in others. But I think the trouble is if we just focus on every individual priority that we've currently got, hundreds, we've got 100 in the NHS mandate. That's not prioritization. That's just a long list of things to do. And I don't think the public will see the difference. So we have got to try and find that balance. So of that £3.5 billion, some of it will clearly be going to support some of the, the smaller services. We're not going to just suddenly stop. All right, we're just going to close half the hospitals down. That's not going to happen. We've got to continue with the services we provide. But I think in terms of the real focused new initiatives, we need to be thinking of doing those at scale. So I think what I'm thinking is, how do we add on things at scale rather than take things away from what we're already doing?
Okay, there's a question at the back first and then at the front. But while our roving mic, and there's someone else who's got a question somewhere, they're popping up all over. I'm going to ask Louise to comment. First of all, about Healthwatch, your role.
Yes.
Because we are, I guess, best description is critical friend.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance of you going a bit native now you've got a seat on this board?
Good question. Good question.
Have a think about
and
that.
As the question and as the presentations were going on and the questions and listening to Stephen, I've been thinking to myself before anything comes out of my mouth, I've been reminding myself in what capacity I'm talking today. And I'm talking today, and everything I've said has been in the capacity of being the National Director for Healthwatch England. But at the same time, Healthwatch is integral to the success of the new system. So there is a crossover there. And actually, I've found that, so despite being the National Director, I've got many, many bosses, as many people have in the room. So technically, my accounting officer is Ian Trenholm, who is the Chief Executive of the Care Quality Commission. And I also report to the Secretary of State via a sponsorship team in the Department of Health. And Ian Trenholm, and I also report to Sir Robert Francis QC, who's the chair of the Committee of Healthwatch England. And when I floated with them the idea of also applying to be on the board of NHS Sussex, the Integrated Care Board, they were incredibly supportive. And Stephen was also supportive of the application, because the benefit, whilst managing the potential conflict of interest, which there is one, and there's a conflict management plan in place, and I think very carefully about it, the benefit of me really deeply understanding the development of an integrated care system and the role Healthwatch can play in it has been fantastic so far. It's really meant that my thinking and my decisions have been much better informed in terms of the role that Healthwatch can play. Now, I'm really clear that Healthwatch remains independent, and the Healthwatches in East Sussex, West Sussex and Brighton and Hove will still have their independent and incredible role to play at place and together into NHS Sussex and into the to the Health and Care Assembly. So that's just really clear for me. And at the same time, I have to be very careful in my role as National Director of Healthwatch England, not to be batting for Sussex all the time. So I'm managing. I think I'm managing it.
Don't let that stop.
I will, also being a Sussex resident, so
But
I'll carry on managing it.
But Healthwatch has some pretty tough duties and obligations. I always call it the Bodie and Doyle moment, where you kick in doors and you can enter and view, and that's quite a critical power to have to go in, which may not make you the best friend of your fellow board members on this new entity.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's on the new entity. The development we've done so far has been the values that we are trying to create are about respect and challenge. You know, nobody's going to hold back from having difficult conversations. I'm certainly not going to, and I don't think any of my colleagues on the board
You've
are going
been warned.
to.
I genuinely encourage it. Louise is an independent non-executive director of NHS Sussex. Louise is not an executive director who has to do the work. So actually the role of the non-executive directors is to challenge the executive. So actually, I think the roles are completely complementary.
Very good. Okay, we have someone who's been very patient at the back.
Hi there, I'm Jane Woodhull, and I'm a health and inclusion
coordinator for LGBT Switchboard in Brighton and Hove. We've recently had the kind of pleasure of working in partnership with Healthwatch, who were commissioned by the CQC to see why LGBTQ people don't feed back about care to the CQC. And it was really good that actually they asked us to work with them, because we have access to community members who we support and provide services for. I guess one of my questions is how do we maintain the involvement of people, particularly in who face minority health inequalities? Because as a health inclusion person who is often commissioned to ask questions, I'm very aware that I'm asking the same questions and I'm getting eye rolls, and people say, oh, again, you're asking us, when many of these solutions are really simple. And it goes back to what Louise was saying, asking someone, you know, what would make things better? And it was a shower. Often, particularly for LGBTQ people, it's about communication, it's about educating staff. So often, so now I don't think we've still had a response from the CQC. So we've got 400 members of our disability and neurodivergence group who are kind of keen to find out, well, we gave you an hour of our time, what's going to come of it? We've given you solutions. And all of these things take time. So how do we keep engaging, and how do you give us confidence that when we're asking the questions and when we're trying to get people to work in partnership, that actually they really are making a difference?
Yep, please do.
That's such a brilliant question. Can I tell a very, very short story? So I went to an ophthalmology appointment at our nearest hospital, which is in Kent. And my partner drove me there. And the nurse who, I don't know if you've had an appointment, when they sort of do the eye dilation thing beforehand. And I said, how long is it going to take? Just because my partner's waiting for me. And she said, oh, it'll only take about half an hour. Then he'll be able to go off to work. And I was like, well, actually, it's a she. And she's retired, so and it's me who will need to get back to work. And this nurse was just wonderful, and she was like deeply mortified, and she was really sorry that she'd made that assumption that I was straight. But I've had that so many times, and I kind of, you know, the experience of LGBTQI people, and there are some obviously much more serious experiences than that, is absolutely going to be partially solved by better communications and cultural change and education in the workforce. And personally, I tell stories like that quite often to people who are responsible for making those changes. And Healthwatch are brilliant, and the voluntary sector are brilliant at just keeping raising those points, because your experience of healthcare and who you are as an individual, you know, should match. You know, you should be respected for who you are, and healthcare professionals should have that level of respect. And I think Healthwatch and the voluntary and community sector are just brilliant at always reminding healthcare providers that that should be the case.
I think actually, just to add to that, I think we've made a real effort to have a very diverse board in all characteristics. And I think that becomes really important. And I think as far as the community engagement is concerned, it's all communities. We've got to stop doing it independently, because I think there's engagement fatigue, if I'm completely honest. And actually, one of my challenges to Tom and our communications team is, can we do some of this with the local authorities? Actually, can we do it with some of the voluntary sector organisations? Because doing it in a joined-up way, it's the one more broader conversation that actually might then lead to action, rather than lots of independent conversations, and then people just get fed up.
You've got a coffee break. We've got Becky Shaw joining us remotely. This is going to be a tense time. Luckily, we have a pre-recorded presentation. If the piece of tape or string between the two tins, or whatever the technology is that we're using, doesn't work. So go and have some coffee, be back here in time for 11:30, and then we'll hear from Becky, and we'll also get in more questions. We could have had a whole session just about questions and answers here. Thank you very much. Let's give our two speakers a round of applause, please.